This edition of the Z-Files here in the Studio A at WAAZ WJSB. I'm Cal Zethmar, and our guest on this edition is a gentleman with a company name that's interesting in history, the Mason-Dixon Company. Polling and Research. We're going to find out a little bit more about that history. It's Larry or Lawrence A. Harris, but we call him, I think folks call you Larry.
They call me Larry.
Okay. Well, first of all, you're in Crestview for a special mission because of what we like to think of as a kind of a special guy from over in Pensacola who really has brought you here, and we're going to find out more about that. But tell us, what does Mason-Dixon Polling and Research do, and where would somebody have seen or heard of your company?
Well, we're a public policy and political research firm. We are located in Washington, D.C. We also have our headquarters in Jacksonville, Florida. Okay. We started out in the late 80s, started doing political polling for newspapers, radio stations, televisions, and news organizations, and we syndicated political polls. So we would go to a radio station like yours, and you would agree to subscribe, to be one of our subscribers to a monthly statewide poll. And we started it out in Maryland. We then went to Virginia, and then in about 85 or so, I took the auto train from D.C. down to St. Cloud, drove up to Jacksonville, and spent the one week driving down the east side of the state, meeting with every newspaper editor of major and smaller papers, every radio station, every news director that would open their door to a 26-year-old kid who was trying to syndicate a political poll. And no one was doing it at the time. Nowadays, doing statewide regular scheduled polling on whatever the issue was of the day. If the legislature was in session, that would be a very busy time for us, and we would ask about public policy issues, about politicians, horse races and elections, anything of public import regarding politics and policy. And so I went down the East Coast one week. At the end of the week, I drove across Alligator Alley, spent the weekend at Bonita Springs, and then I spent the next week driving up the Gulf Coast. Okay. All the way, every single radio station, TV station, news director, and newspaper editor. And it is a wonderful way to get to know a state and a city, because as you know, the newspaper or the radio station or the TV station, that's the hub. That's where people get their news. So we got critical mass and enough clients to do a subscription poll every month, and from there we built out and have done polling in every single state on just about every single issue that there is. We've done the polling for NBC National News, election polling for years. As you know, the media business has constricted, and newspapers have been going out of business and have been challenged left and right, with the challenge of migrating to digital and online, and then the whole idea of, well, how do you pay for it? And the budgets have been constricted. And so that part of the business is not as big as it used to be, but we have grown our business by working with advocacy groups, some campaign work, state and local governments, nonprofits, and that again is still focused on public policy and politics, but also organizational development, where we assist organizations in researching where their company is or nonprofit is in terms of their organization, and when they're going through a strategic planning process, and even local and state governments, and which is what we're here in Crestview to do, to take a look at where the city is, where the city wants to go, and then what has to happen in between for you to accomplish your ultimate vision and goals.
So in the past couple of years, were you involved in any political research during this last election cycle that we're just now having the end of it today, I guess you could say, with the inauguration?
Certainly. We've done polling in several dozen states during this election cycle. But an additional challenge to the constriction of the media business, so many universities like Marist and Quinnipiac and just about there are just so many, and they give it away as advertising. And a way to, Quinnipiac, they had their when they started putting out their polling, they had applications to their university increased by 25% because they were being mentioned on national news. Right. And that's great, and it's competition, and we welcome that competition, but it does put the strain on, and the budgets of the media organizations have constricted. And they've laid off reporters, and they run on shoestring budgets, so they don't have the money to put into additional services. So that's another challenge. So that part of the business has, for years now, for the last 10 years, has not really been a core of what we do. It's what we're known for because that's what gets reported. But the vast majority, the volume of our work is with private concerns or not media related.
I know as a guy, when I was in my young radio years and was concerned over how the county, the radio station I managed, had only 12 diaries out of the 150 for the whole Chattanooga market.
Yeah.
And I said, 12 diaries out of 20,000 people in that little tiny, we were like a bedroom county to Chattanooga.
Right.
So I studied up some of the NAB books we had and other things and learned about that bell curve and all of that things, and how you get to a certain point where getting the next 50 people does not move that plus or minus thing a whole bunch anymore.
Yes.
But the technology has so changed now. So getting to the people you want to talk to and actually get information from, it's either you got to reach them by telephone or reach them in person, or now I guess there's these electronic survey things as well. What have you found with your company and the kind of thing you're going to do for Crestview? What method of technology to gather it? I gather you got a software program you can put all the answers in and help you tabulate the data.
Right. Those are called CADI systems, computer-aided interview systems, and telephone interview. And we conduct, for the vast majority of our research is conducted by telephone still. We do now and have for years use cell phone numbers to contact folks, because I myself, I don't have a landline at my house. Right. And if you wanted to conduct a poll with me, you'd have to get me on my iPhone. Right. So as technology changes, we migrate to it. Now, when we first started out, right out of college, our first computer was a Commodore 64.
That one.
And the program was written by a college buddy for a 6-pack of beer. And the media storage was a cassette tape. And you could only put in 200 interviews at a time, or the system would crash. And if you were doing and we all did, startup business, you're jack of all trades, you do the interviewing and the data entry. Right. And if you were not paying attention and went past that 200th interview, it would crash and you lost all of it. And now we have, our call center is out in Utah, where they have a very well-educated population with a neutral accent, and it's a low cost of living, so we can get a real bang for the buck with qualified interviewers the latest technology, a neutral accent so they can call anywhere in the country without offending somebody. We wouldn't offend a Yankee or a Southerner, and that really does make a difference. When we go in Florida, in particular, we make certain that we have bilingual interviewers, and on some occasions we use call centers in Miami, especially if we're doing a congressional race down in Miami, or if we're going to be doing a local race in Dade County, or the like.
Okay. Now let's get to how we got you to Crestview. There's a gentleman in Pensacola that many people know about named Quint Studor and his wife Rishi, and they have become real community leaders in that community. If you know about the Blue Wahoos baseball team, then you know about Quint Studor. And I see him, of course, he's been over here. He came over here to do a presentation at one of our CRA, Community Redevelopment Agency, Crestview meetings, and basically offered to say, we're going to help you out get started here. I'm going to get this company, Mason-Dixon. He was going to pay the bill for it and get started. Now, you've been doing Pensacola work now for several years.
For 8-9 years. Every year we've done a survey to measure the public's opinion and attitudes and awareness about what's going on in local government, but it's really about measuring the quality of life. And that's what we call that survey, the Pensacola Quality of Life Survey. It's now conducted for the Pensacola Young Professionals, which is a group. I guess it would be like the old JCs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they're a group of committed young professionals who are dedicated to the proposition that they're going to improve and be engaged in improving the quality of life for all the residents of the city of Pensacola.
And so the kind of things you want to find out, and the reason we're talking about this now on the Z-Files is sometime maybe in the next 30 to 60 days, you may get a phone call. And hopefully the caller ID will have something to kind of, those who see it, say something Crestview or something, so you want to talk to them. And now you get a chance to sound off about what you like or don't like or what you want Crestview to have. And of course, anybody of us who's been in this town covering news will tell you, fix that. Traffic is going to be one of the big things. And of course, the city government has to keep saying, we can't do a thing about 85 because that's a state highway. And if somebody can get the money up, that's the whole challenge everywhere. Where's that money going to come from to build roads? And we could go into a whole reason why the money is less now than it used to be. But anyway, the kind of things you're going to try to find out for here, like you have for Pensacola, is to find out what?
Well, this first survey, it's a benchmark survey. It's the first time out, and we're going to take a snapshot in time of what the residents think. Now, not just voters, but all residents, because that's what the government serves, not just the voters, all residents. And we'll be doing a survey by telephone of adult residents in the municipality of Crestview. And we will be doing that by telephone. We'll be developing our sample frame, our random sample, from a list of good numbers, of known numbers, both cell phone and landline. And you have to purchase lists for cell phones, and that's an expensive proposition. Right. And then we will interview either between 625 to 800 conduct interviews, and that will result in a margin of error of 4.5% to 3.5%, depending upon the sample size that we settle upon. And that simply means that if the answer to a question in a survey are findings that X% of the residents of Crestview feel this way about an issue, that within that finding would be true within 4 percentage points, 95% of the time. So you can have the laws and science of statistics have been well proved So what that information then is used to, by yourself, by the public, by officials, by policymakers, to make decisions in terms of, well, you've only got so much time, so much money, and so much resources. We've got 100 problems. Well, what are the top 10? And what are the top 3? Which are critical? Which are most important? We'll be able to rank order one of the questions. It's an open-ended question. What's the most important issue facing the city of Crestview? Now, I don't know the answer to that right now, in terms of what the public's going to say. Right. But in addition to the survey, we've been researching for the last couple of months, talking to public officials here and elsewhere in the state who face similar challenges and are similar in demographics and profile of Crestview. I've been talking to people at the Florida League of Cities. I've been talking to economic development people. I've been talking to elected officials, appointed officials, businessmen and women, investors, potential investors, people who have had experience with the city of Crestview, people who, retail recruiters, all types of people who would be involved with the economic and community development for the future of Crestview. And so what that does, it gives us the background and context for the upcoming survey. And this entire week, I have been here in town interviewing each of your council members, the mayor, members of the CRA board, department heads of city government, economic development people with the county, business leaders, and people who are in a position to impact and help shape the future of Crestview. And in those interviews, I've been asking those same kind of questions that we'll be asking the public in our survey. What's good about Crestview? What are your advantages here? What are your opportunities? What are your weaknesses? What are the threats to your success as a community of maintaining and improving your quality of life? And when we talk about quality of life, let me define what that is. We're all human beings. We all love our families. We all want a place to raise our children and where it's safe, it's welcoming. We want to have a good education for our children, good educational opportunities for ourselves. We want to have entertainment, movies, nightclubs, restaurants, bars. We want to have cultural opportunities, live theater, dance, live performance. We want to have a safe community. We want to be able to walk around knowing that that you'll be safe and your kids will be safe, and you can send them to the park and whatever the case may be. Traffic, you mentioned traffic. How that has a tremendous impact on a person's life. If you get up in the morning and you walk out that door and you got 20 minutes of bumper to bumper, well, that doesn't start your day out too well.
In our area, if you're going to work in some areas, you've got 30 to 45 minutes of that.
Exactly.
And coming home at night.
And that's time away from your family.
Yeah.
And what does that do? That impacts the quality of your life.
Sure.
Not only the frustration while you're in traffic, but time and opportunity lost that you could be doing something more enjoyable,
yeah.
more important. The time you could be spend helping your neighbor. And in addition to the activities and time spent, quality of life is also, are you a welcoming community? Is there a sense of place? Is there a destination where the community meets to celebrate the community? Is it a welcoming place to immigrants? Is it a welcoming place and a good place to live for people of color? Is it a place where a young entrepreneur would want to come and invest their savings to start a new business? Is it a place where the local government supports properly and effectively and efficiently that entrepreneur who wants to come in and possibly invest? Do you have a responsive government? Are decisions made quickly and with best practices in mind? Is your government structure even capable of doing that and going through that process of efficiently planning and implementing policies and programs that contribute to the quality of life?
You know, I got a good question to throw at you because I observe the elections. We're one of these rare radio stations that actually broadcasts from the supervisor elections on election night as he reports out. And now it's fast with all the new stuff we have. If you're a city resident, do you vote in city elections, and why not? Because barely 10 to 15% of our city residents who are registered voters turn out to vote in the city elections. And that's bad. That's the person who's got the hands on your wallet more than anybody else.
And we will ask questions related to that, in addition to how much confidence do you have in your local elected officials. We're going to do a rating of the mayor. We're going to do a job rating. Would you rate your mayor's performance as excellent, good, fair, poor? How would you rate the city council? Excellent, good, fair, poor. How would you rate the city clerk? Good, fair, poor. We're going to ask, how would you rate the Okaloosa County Commission? Because that's important to know, because they all are in a position to impact the quality of life.
Well, great. Well, so folks, you may be lucky to get one of the phone calls. You say, I always want to sound off. Now, if you get my Z-Files weekly newsletter, which will be going out every Friday right about midday when we send it out, and there'll be a link to this interview in the weekly newsletter where you can click to it and see it video-wise. The radio broadcast, of course, you're listening to it from between 7:06 and 7:30 on Saturday morning. But also on my newsletter, another survey that's underway being done by Retail Strategies. There's a link there, and you can go right there and do that survey online. And that is also the technique that, like SurveyMonkey and other things that people see of ways to give opinions. But that's only going to be filled out by those who want to see it and want to do it. You're going to have to dig into at least one person for as many households as you can. And I think City Clerk Betsy Roy pointed out to me, she's got a database of everybody who's got water. All the people who get water, the 99% are inside the city limits, probably, and so they live here. Because what you got here is we got a challenge on phone numbers. We've got a couple of thousand of new residents who still kept their North Carolina cell phones when they moved here from Fort Bragg. So you'll have to find a way to get to those people too, because they're now new residents.
Right. That is a challenge, but there's technology and there are ways to get a hold of them.
Oh, great. Well, we look forward to seeing what you do. I know you're going to hear this week, and then sometime in the next 30, 60 days, the phone call system will start.
That's correct.
And then when you'll be back with a complete detailed report?
Within a couple of months.
Okay. And we'll be there. You'll have a news presentation, and we'll get to all see what we think of ourselves.
And it's important to, once it is completed, that. And here's the purpose of it at the end of the day. We've done this in Pensacola. Our first survey was 8-9 years ago, and we did a benchmark survey. And at the time, they had a weak mayor form of government, and we did it Escambia County wide, and broke it out, city of Pensacola, and then the suburbs, and then combined them for Escambia County. And we found great dissatisfaction. Low level of confidence in elected officials, low level of confidence, and we asked the question, tell me if you agree or disagree with this statement. I understand and support the vision for the future economic development and community development for the city of Pensacola. And, well, they didn't have a plan. They had a waterfront, And to the extent that people said, yes, I do understand it, it was simply because of the waterfront. But still, there was no articulated, organized plan for it. And they got terrible low ratings. The government did. The economic development opportunities. The majority of people in Escambia County, for 8 straight years, the majority said the county was not a good place to raise a family. And then we ask, why is that? Lack of educational opportunities, lack of employment opportunities, lack of cultural opportunities, lack of a place to go on the weekend to do something fun. All those quality of life factors were rated fairly low. It was the highest ratings. It was a great place to retire, and folks 65 and over gave it the highest ratings. But if you were an entrepreneur, and we would ask the question: is Escambia County a place that is welcoming and supportive of young entrepreneurs? Lousy ratings. That poll was issued, got a lot of attention. And that's its purpose, to educate the public, make them aware. And so when
and the elected officials
and the elected officials
and all the departments
and the Chamber of Commerce,
right,
and potential and current investors, and then people say, okay, well, hey, we got a problem, and so what are we going to do about it? And that's what started as a result of the first survey. When the council got lousy ratings and the commission got lousy ratings, then the press, and that's your job to make certain that this thing gets reported, and then people started holding them accountable. Well, it's when you go to a council meeting and you only got 50 people in there and 25 have signed up.
We had one last week with nobody but me and Wayne Steele in the audience.
Well,
and nobody else, and the council members, the mayor and the clerk,
right,
and the lawyer.
And so you might say, okay, well, we've only got so much time, so I'll take 10 witnesses for it and 10 witnesses against it. Yeah. Well, that's not a scientific survey. That's a self-selecting sample of people who are dedicated to their position. But is that reflective of the needs and wants and desires and attitudes of the public at large and the voters? No. Okay. So now people were able to say, I have a scientific survey conducted by a nationally reputed polling firm. And here's what they have documented, what they have measured. And then when you realize that they couldn't get to where they needed to go in terms of economic development and improvements in the quality of life, they realized that, and in this process, that we need a new form of government. We need a strong mayor or a CEO of some sort who is accountable, because no one was being held accountable for anything in particular. They were accountable to a council. Well, that's 5 bosses. And in actuality, 3 bosses, depending upon the day and the vote, because it takes 3 to make a decision. So imagine you're a department head and you're trying to get something done, and your employee, your supervisor of a project says, hey, boss, am I got the go-ahead to do this thing? And he goes, let me make 5 phone calls, and as soon as I get 3 okays on this one issue, as opposed to Crestview, as in Pensacola, has a large and wonderful military community. They know what command structure is. Can you imagine charge that hill? Hang on a second. Let me check with the 3 lieutenants and see what 2 of the 3 think. Meanwhile, you're getting picked off left and right. You're not effective. You've got to have accountability. Who's in control? Every employee for the city of Pensacola, or and anywhere, and in Crestview, they've got to be able to answer the question: who do I work for? What is my job? What am I accountable for? And how is it measured? And measurement is so important. And that's what the survey is in part going to do. We're going to be measuring attitudes and opinions about public services. We're going to be asking about Is it a safe place? What about the traffic? Do you have access to health care? How would you rate your fire and public safety services? Your trash pickup? Parks and open space, do you have access to? Is it in good repair? So we will quantify that information and present a report, and then people can look at it and say, hey, we are or are not where we need to be. Now, based on my research over the past couple of months, and my qualitative research and my interviews here this week, I can tell you with a good degree of confidence, based on my 35 years experience in politics and public policy and research, that the city of Crestview certainly has much improvements to make in many areas, and that your current form of government just ain't going to cut it. You can't get there. Crestview, there are 85 municipalities in the state of Florida that have a weak mayor, no CEO, a weak mayor council, no strong mayor or town manager or administrator. There are 85 of them. The population in those towns range from 5 individuals all the way up to Crestview is the largest in the state without a CEO of 24,000 or so.
Right.
After that, it is Sebring at 10,000. Okay. After that, it's below 2,000. The average population of the municipalities without a CEO is 1,700 population. Okay. If you took Crestview out, which is an outlier and skews those results, it's 700. The average population size of a weak mayor council government in the state of Florida is 700 people. Crestview has got nearly 25,000 and growing. Yeah. You can't service, and this is not my opinion. This is based on best practices. This is based on the Florida League of Cities, based on public policy experts. It's a discipline. It's a science. You get a degree in city and town management, and the people who study efficiency and effective delivery of public services, they will tell you that a city of this size, of its budget and its delivery of services demands, requires a boss. One person who's accountable, that the community can look to, and that the department heads and employees can look to for clarity, focus, and direction. And in addition, a champion. Somebody who champions the cause of Crestview and accepts the moral obligation of improving the quality of life and making certain that you have the structure and the processes and the right people in place to make Crestview a better place.
It's going to be interesting to see what happens. Folks, you may be one of those that gets a phone call if you live in the city limits of Crestview. And either way, you're going to hear all about it. It was in a matter of a few months when we bring back our coverage of what happens. And Larry, we thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
And good luck.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate it.